My mother vanished when I was 7, leaving me adrift in a sea of silk and silence, captained by my father, Alastair Thorne. He was a man who charted his life in profit margins and social capital, a man for whom emotion was a currency best spent sparingly, if at all. He remarried, of course. Vivian swept in on a wave of champagne wishes and perfectly coiffed blonde hair, bringing with her Lysander, her son, a boy 2 years my senior. Vivian wasn't cruel, not in the storybook sense of locked towers and poisoned apples. Her cruelty was a more subtle, insidious thing, a constant, low hum of disregard. She prioritized appearances, social climbing, and, naturally, Lysander. He received the warm smiles, the effortless praise, the casual touches of affection that were always just out of my reach. Lysander, at first, was my designated tormentor. He'd accidentally spill juice on my meticulously prepared homework, borrow my favorite toys and return them broken, and whisper cutting remarks about my mousy demeanor in the echoing hallways. Yet even in those early days, I sensed a flicker of something else beneath the practiced sneer. We were both, in our own ways, outsiders in this gilded cage. He, the favored son, burdened by expectation. Me, the forgotten heir, adrift in the shadows. There was a shared neglect, a silent understanding that passed between us in the stolen glances across the vast dining table, a kinship forged in the absence of genuine warmth. The fire changed everything. I was 10. Thorne Manor was ablaze with one of Father's infamous parties, a swirling vortex of power brokers and socialites, all vying for his attention. The air throbbed with forced laughter and the clinking of crystal. I, deemed too insignificant to be presented, had retreated to the old library in the West Wing, a place of dust-covered tomes and forgotten dreams. It was there, amidst the scent of aged paper and leather, that the smoke first curled under the door. Panic seized me, a cold fist clenching around my heart. The library was a labyrinth of towering shelves, and the fire, fueled by ancient wood and dried paper, was spreading with terrifying speed. I ran, coughing, my eyes stinging, but every corridor was a wall of flames, every exit a fiery maw. I was trapped. "Help!" I screamed, my voice swallowed by the roar of the inferno. "Someone, please!" But the music from the party, the boisterous laughter, drowned out my cries. I was alone, utterly and completely alone, facing a death that felt both terrifying and strangely inevitable. It was then that he emerged, not with a fanfare, not with a dramatic pronouncement, but with a quiet, chilling calm that settled over my panic like a shroud. I felt a shift within me, a hardening, a clarity that sliced through the fear. It wasn't me thinking these thoughts, planning these actions. It was someone else. "Move," a voice whispered, not in my ears but inside my head, a voice devoid of emotion yet utterly commanding. "The window, the old oak. You can climb down." My body moved, seemingly of its own accord. I smashed a window with a heavy, leather-bound book, ignoring the shards of glass that sliced into my skin. The ancient oak tree, its branches gnarled and reaching like skeletal fingers, was my only escape. "Don't look down. Focus on the branch. Grip tight." The voice guided me, step by precarious step, down the burning building. The heat scorched my skin, the smoke choked my lungs, but I didn't falter. I moved with a precision, a lack of hesitation, that was utterly foreign to my usual clumsy, anxious self. When I finally reached the ground, collapsing onto the cool, damp earth, I looked back at the inferno that had almost consumed me, and I knew, with a chilling certainty, that I hadn't done that alone. Who are you?" I whispered, my voice hoarse and trembling. "I am Rex," the voice replied, calm and steady within the chaos of my mind. I am here to protect you. After that, Rex became my silent partner, my secret weapon. He wasn't always present, but he was always there, lurking in the shadows of my consciousness, ready to emerge whenever I faced a threat I couldn't handle. He was the one who stood up to Lysander, meeting his sneers with a cold, unwavering stare that finally silenced the taunts. He was the one who helped me navigate the treacherous social landscape of my father's world, whispering strategies, analyzing people's motives with chilling accuracy. I was sent to the best doctors, pompous men with expensive degrees and even more expensive hourly rates, who called it dissociative identity disorder. He believes he has an alter ego, a protector, a delusion brought about by trauma, Dr. Albright told my father, in a bored tone that said he was already calculating what new car he could afford with the Thorns' money. "Can you cure him?" my father asked. I was sitting right there, of course, but they talked about me like I was an inconvenient stain on an otherwise immaculate rug. "Cure? There is no cure, Mr. Thorn. We can manage it with therapy, medication." Therapy was a joke. Rex would let me talk about my favorite books, my anxieties about school. He'd let me cry when I described missing my mother. Then he'd tell me to dry my eyes and stop being weak. The medication dulled the edges, made me sluggish, made us sluggish. Rex hated it. One appointment, Rex took over completely. I remember watching, a detached observer, as he fixed Dr. Albright with a chillingly blank stare. "You think you can dissect me, doctor?" Rex's voice, my voice, was flat, devoid of any inflection. "You think you can unravel the complexities of the human mind with your textbooks and your jargon? You know nothing." Dr. Albright, for the first time, looked unnerved. "Elias, is that you?" Rex smiled, a slow, chilling curve of the lips that didn't reach the eyes. "Elias is indisposed. He's tired of being poked and prodded. He's tired of your pills." Now, let us not get upset," Dr. Albright said quickly. "I am not upset, doctor, I assure you," Rex replied. After that, the medication was quietly discontinued. The therapy sessions became less frequent, then stopped altogether. Father, ever practical, decided that a slightly eccentric heir was better than a publicly insane one. I was released back into the golden cage, Rex my silent, ever-vigilant guardian. Years passed. I learned to navigate the world with a carefully constructed facade of normalcy, hiding the duality within. Then, at a charity gala, a swirling masquerade of wealth and pretense, I saw her, Seraphina Vance. She was standing near a towering ice sculpture, the refracted light catching the fiery highlights in her dark hair. She was laughing, a genuine, melodic sound that cut through the manufactured gaiety of the room. She wore a gown the color of deep-sea pearls, and there was an intelligence in her dark eyes, a spark of something real that drew me in like a moth to a flame. "She's beautiful," I murmured, the words escaping before I could censor them. "Vance family?" Rex's voice echoed in my mind, cool and analytical. Shipping routes, declining fortunes, social standing still intact, but precarious. I ignored him. For the first time in years, I felt a stirring of something other than fear or calculation. It was hope. A foolish, fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, I could find something real, something beyond the gilded bars of my existence. I approached her, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. "May I have this dance?" I asked, my voice sounding surprisingly steady. She turned, her eyes widening slightly as she took in my appearance. "I suppose so," she said, a hint of amusement in her voice. As we danced, I felt an unfamiliar warmth spread through me. She was witty, engaging, and surprisingly down to earth for someone raised in such a rarefied atmosphere. She spoke passionately about art, about social justice, about making a difference in the world. I, in turn, found myself opening up, revealing glimpses of the person I kept hidden beneath the carefully constructed mask. "She's lying," Rex whispered, a cold serpent of doubt coiling in my gut. "Look at her eyes. She's assessing you, calculating your worth." "No," I thought back fiercely. "She's different." Alistair, of course, approved of the match. He saw Serafina as a strategic acquisition, a way to finally gain control of the Vance family's coveted shipping routes, the last piece of the puzzle in his relentless quest for dominance. He summoned me to his study, the air thick with the scent of expensive cigars and ambition. "Serafina Vance," he said, his voice a low rumble. "A good choice, Elias. Beautiful, well-connected, and pliable. Her family's finances are, shall we say, less than robust. This alliance will be mutually beneficial." I felt a flicker of anger, a spark of rebellion against his cold calculation. "She's more than just a business deal, Father." Alistair raised an eyebrow, a hint of amusement in his cold eyes. "Don't be naive, Elias. Everything is a business deal. Love, marriage, family. It's all about leverage and control. Remember that?" Rex stirred, a silent agreement with Alistair's words, but I pushed him down. I wanted to believe in something more. The engagement was a whirlwind of lavish parties, photo opportunities, and carefully orchestrated public displays of affection. Serafina played her part perfectly. The picture of the devoted fiancé. She smiled for the cameras. She charmed my father. She even managed to feign interest in my Rex-curated collection of antique maps. But there were cracks. Fleeting moments when the mask slipped, a flicker of boredom during a tedious opera performance, a distracted glance at a handsome, powerful media mogul across a crowded room. A carefully worded compliment that felt more like an assessment than an expression of affection. "Elias, darling," she'd say, her voice honeyed and smooth. "You're so steady, so reliable. It's comforting." But the word comforting hung in the air, tinged with a subtle condescension, a hint of something. Less. Rex documented it all. He meticulously recorded every conversation, every gesture, every fleeting expression. He built a case, a dossier of doubt in the hidden recesses of my mind. "She's using you, Elias," he'd whisper, his voice a constant, insidious drone. "She sees you as a stepping stone, a means to an end." "Stop it, Rex," I'd reply, my voice tight with denial. "You're wrong. She cares about me." One evening, Lysander found me staring out at the rain-slicked city from my balcony. He'd been drinking, his usual carefully maintained composure slightly frayed. "You're a fool, Elias," he said, his voice slurred but earnest. "What are you on about?" I responded, keeping my voice steady. "Serafina, she's not what you think." "And you would know, would you?" I felt Rex rising, my hands balling into fists. "I know her kind," Lysander continued, ignoring my defensiveness. "I've seen it before. Vivian, she taught me well. These women, they're like spiders. They spin their webs and they wait. And you, little brother, are walking right into it." "You're jealous," I accused, the words bitter on my tongue. Lysander laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "Jealous? Of you? No, Elias. I pity you. You're so desperate for affection, for someone to see you that you're blind to the truth." He leaned closer, his breath reeking of whiskey. "She'll break you, Elias. And when she does, don't come crying to me." He stumbled away, leaving me alone with the rain and the growing unease that even I, in my desperate need to believe, could no longer ignore. Rex was right, and I was about to pay the price. 2. The betrayal. Approx 1,000 words. Jasper Croft arrived like a rogue brushstroke across the meticulously painted canvas of our lives. He was an artist, a sculptor to be precise, lauded for his provocative and challenging pieces, swirling metal forms that, to my untutored eye, looked like expensive scrap. He was introduced at one of Vivian's excruciatingly curated art gatherings, a fundraiser for some vaguely defined cultural initiative. He was everything I wasn't. Where I was reserved, he was flamboyant. Where I was steeped in the traditions of Thorn Industries, he was a self-proclaimed rebel, railing against the constraints of the corporate machine. He had a shock of unruly dark hair, perpetually ink-stained fingers, and a disarming smile that seemed to crinkle the corners of his intensely blue eyes. Serafina, of course, was immediately captivated. "Elias, you must meet Jasper Croft," she said, her voice laced with an excitement I hadn't heard in months. "He's simply brilliant. He sees the world in such a different way." I watched them across the crowded room, their heads bent together, engaged in animated conversation. Jasper was gesturing wildly, his hands shaping invisible forms in the air, and Serafina was laughing, a light, airy sound that grated on my nerves. "Danger," Rex whispered, a cold shiver down my spine. "Observe." I forced a smile. "He seems interesting." It was a weak word, a pathetic attempt to mask the sudden knot of unease in my stomach. Over the next few weeks, Jasper Croft became a fixture in our lives. He'd join us for dinners, accompany Serafina to gallery openings, even spontaneously drop by Thorn Manor for impromptu discussions about art and philosophy. "He finds our world so stifling, Elias," Serafina explained one evening as we sat on the terrace, the city lights twinkling below. "He says we're all trapped in gilded cages, prisoners of our own privilege. And do you agree?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. She hesitated, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. "There's a truth to it, I suppose. We do live in a bubble, don't we?" She looked away towards the city. "Jasper sees beauty in the everyday, in the raw, the unrefined. He makes me question things." "He makes her question you," Rex corrected, his voice a low growl in my mind. I ignored him, focusing on Serafina's hand, resting lightly on the table. I reached out and covered it with my own. "I want you to be happy, Sarah," I said, my voice sincere. "If spending time with Jasper makes you happy, then I support it." It was a lie, of course. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to object, to forbid her from seeing him, but I couldn't. I loved her too much, trusted her too completely. I believed, with a desperate, foolish hope, that her affection for me was stronger than any fleeting infatuation. Rex, however, was not so easily fooled. He began his meticulous documentation. He noted the frequency of their meetings, the coded language they used in their art discussions, the lingering glances that passed between them when they thought I wasn't looking. He even managed, somehow, to access Serafina's phone records, revealing a flurry of late-night texts and calls exchanged with Jasper. "Look, Elias," Rex would say, projecting images onto the screen of my mind blurry photographs, snippets of overheard conversations, damning text messages. "She's slipping away. You're losing her." "It's just friendship, Rex," I'd insist, my voice strained. "They share a passion for art. It's innocent." "Innocent?" Rex's voice was laced with scorn. "Do you see innocence in the way he looks at her? Do you hear innocence in her whispered laughter? You are deluding yourself." But I refused to see. I clung to the image of Serafina I had created, the woman I believed she was, the woman I desperately needed her to be. The revelation, when it came, was brutal in its banality. A glossy society magazine, Metropolitan Scene, splashed across its cover. The headline screamed, "Vance Heiress in Secret Rendezvous." Below, a grainy photograph showed Serafina and Jasper, locked in a passionate embrace in the secluded rose garden of the Van Derlin estate, the site of another one of those endless society galas. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The blood drained from my face, leaving me cold and numb. I stared at the photograph, at Serafina's flushed cheeks, at Jasper's possessive hand on her waist, at the undeniable evidence of my betrayal. The magazine landed on Alistair's desk with a resounding thud. He summoned me immediately, his face a mask of thunderous rage. "Explain this, Elias!" he roared, his voice shaking the very foundations of his office. This scandal! Do you realize what this means for the merger, for the Thorn name?" He wasn't concerned about my heartbreak, about my humiliation. He was concerned about the business, about the damage to his precious reputation. I don't know what to say, Father," I stammered, the words hollow and meaningless. "You don't know?" he thundered. "You were engaged to that woman, and you let this happen? You are a disgrace, Elias, a weak, pathetic disgrace." His words, normally so cutting, barely registered. I was still reeling from the image in the magazine, from the crushing weight of Serafina's betrayal. Serafina arrived shortly after, her face pale but resolute. She didn't offer apologies, didn't beg for forgiveness. She stood before me, her chin lifted, her eyes defiant. "Elias," she began, her voice surprisingly steady, "I'm in love with Jasper." The words, so simple, so direct, hit me like a physical blow. I felt a strange detachment, as if I were watching this scene unfold from a great distance. I thought you loved me," I managed to say, the words barely a whisper. She looked at me, her expression a mixture of pity and contempt. "I tried, Elias. I really did, but you're just empty." "Empty?" I repeated, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. "You're so controlled, so emotionally stunted. You live your life behind walls, afraid to feel anything, afraid to take any risks. Jasper, he's alive. He feels everything so intensely. He makes me feel real." She paused, her gaze softening slightly. "I thought I could use you, Elias. I thought I could marry you for security, for your family's name, and still find happiness elsewhere. But I can't. I can't live a lie anymore." I stared at her, numb with disbelief. This wasn't the woman I thought I knew. This was a stranger, a cold, calculating stranger who had used me, discarded me, and now stood before me, justifying her betrayal with a cruel honesty that was more devastating than any lie. "Get out," I said, my voice flat, emotionless. She hesitated, perhaps expecting a scene, a display of the raw emotion she claimed I lacked. But there was nothing, just an empty silence. As she turned to leave, a flicker of something, triumph? Relief? Crossed her face. It was that flicker, that final, subtle expression of victory that triggered the shift. The world snapped into sharp, cold focus. The pain, the humiliation, the heartbreak, it all receded, replaced by a chilling, clarifying calm. "It's time," Rex whispered, his voice a steel thread in the silence of my mind. "Let me handle this." And I did. I let go. I retreated into the shadows, surrendering control to the other, the protector, the one who felt no pain, no regret, no remorse, the one who would make her pay. The shattered, heartbroken Elias was gone. Rex had arrived, and Serafina Vance had no idea what she had unleashed. 3. The Awakening. Approx. 500 words. The drive was a blur, streetlights smeared into streaks of white and yellow, The city a cacophony of horns and sirens that barely registered. I, or rather, Rex, gripped the steering wheel, his hand steady, his focus absolute. Elias was gone, tucked away in some deep, dark recess of our shared consciousness, a shattered remnant of a broken heart. A clean break, Rex thought, his mind a cold, calculating machine. No messy emotions, no lingering attachments, just strategy. He chose the location carefully, a quiet side street lined with parked cars. He accelerated, then, at the last moment, swerved, slamming the sleek sports car into the rear of a battered sedan. The impact was jarring, but controlled. Enough to cause a commotion, enough to draw attention, but not enough to cause serious injury. The airbags deployed, filling the car with a suffocating cloud of white. Rex waited, feigning disorientation, until a small crowd gathered, their faces etched with concern and curiosity. "Are you all right, sir?" a man asked, peering through the shattered window. Rex blinked slowly, as if struggling to focus. I don't know. My head, I can't." He let his voice trail off, clutching his head dramatically. The performance had begun. The paramedics arrived, their sirens slicing through the night. Rex allowed them to examine him, answering their questions with a carefully crafted vagueness. He complained of a throbbing headache, blurred vision, and, most importantly, memory loss. I can't remember what happened," he stammered, his voice laced with a convincing tremor. "One minute I was driving, the next, everything's a blank." The hospital was a sterile, antiseptic world of beeping machines and hushed whispers. Rex lay in the pristine white bed, the perfect picture of the bewildered patient. He submitted to the endless tests, the probing questions, the concerned frowns of the doctors. "It's likely a concussion," the neurologist explained, his voice grave. "Combined with the emotional shock, it's not uncommon to experience temporary amnesia. We'll need to run some more tests, but it's possible. Some memories may never return." Rex nodded slowly, feigning comprehension. Perfect, he thought. The stage is set. Elias, the man who had loved Serafina with a desperate, consuming passion, was officially gone. In his place was a void. A blank slate upon which Rex could rewrite the narrative. Serafina arrived, her face a mask of carefully controlled concern. She rushed to his bedside, her hand reaching out to touch his. "Elias, oh my God, are you all right? I came as soon as I heard—" Rex looked at her, his gaze blank, uncomprehending. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice a polite, distant murmur. "Do I know you?" Serafina recoiled, her hand dropping back to her side. Her carefully constructed facade crumbled, replaced by a flicker of genuine shock. "Elias? It's me, Serafina, your fiancé." Rex tilted his head, a faint furrow appearing on his brow. "Fiancé?" he repeated, the word sounding foreign on his tongue. I don't understand. I have no memory of that." He watched her, his gaze devoid of any warmth, any recognition. He saw the confusion, the disbelief, the dawning horror in her eyes. He saw the carefully crafted narrative she had built around him, the narrative of the cold, unfeeling Elias, begin to crumble. "The doctor said you might have amnesia," she stammered, her voice losing its usual composure. "From the accident, from the shock." Rex nodded slowly. "Yes, the accident. I remember lights, a crash, and then nothing." He paused, letting the silence hang heavy in the air. "I'm afraid I don't remember anything about our relationship. I only know what the doctors have told me. My name is Elias Thorne, and apparently, you were someone important to me." The "were" hung in the air, a subtle but devastating blow. "Important?" Serafina repeated, a flicker of anger crossing her face. "Is that all I was to you?" Rex shrugged, a gesture of utter indifference. "I don't know. Perhaps you can refresh my memory." He saw the frustration building in her eyes. She was used to control, to manipulation. But she couldn't manipulate a man who had no memory of her, no emotional leverage to exploit. "We were in love," she said, the words sounding forced, unconvincing even to her own ears. "We were going to be married." "Married," Rex repeated, testing the word, feigning curiosity. "And were we happy?" It was a cruel question, a deliberate twist of the knife. He knew the answer. He had seen the evidence, heard her confession, but he wanted to hear her say it. He wanted to force her to confront the wreckage of their relationship, to acknowledge her own role in its destruction. Serafina hesitated, her eyes darting around the room, as if seeking an escape. We had our challenges," she finally said, her voice carefully neutral. "But, yes, we were fond of each other." "Fond?" Rex raised an eyebrow, a flicker of amusement in his otherwise blank expression. "That doesn't sound very passionate." He paused, then added with a seemingly innocent curiosity. "And what about Jasper? The doctor mentioned a Jasper Croft? Was he a friend of ours?" Serafina paled. The name hung in the air like a poisoned dart. "Jasper, he's an acquaintance, an artist." "Ah, an artist," Rex repeated, his voice smooth as silk. "Did we commission him to do a portrait of you, perhaps? I seem to recall something about a garden. Roses." He let the words trail off, watching her closely. He saw the panic flare in her eyes, the desperate attempt to regain control. She had come here expecting a broken, vulnerable Elias, a man she could manipulate, perhaps even salvage for her own purposes. Instead, she had found a stranger, a cold, detached observer who held all the cards, and he was playing them with a ruthless, calculated precision that chilled her to the bone. The game, Rex knew, had just begun. 4. The Reckoning. Approx 2,500 words. The sterile scent of the hospital room was quickly replaced by the familiar, oppressive aroma of Alistair's study old leather, expensive cigars, and the faint, lingering scent of fear. Rex, seated in Elias's usual chair facing Alistair across the vast mahogany desk, allowed a faint, polite smile to touch his lips. "Father," he began, his voice devoid of any warmth, "I've made a decision. The engagement to Miss Vance is off." Alistair, who had been pacing the room like a caged tiger, stopped abruptly. "Off? What are you talking about, Elias? The merger is crucial. The Vance shipping routes are no longer a priority," Rex interjected smoothly. "Miss Vance's indiscretion has made her an unsuitable partner, both personally and professionally. The risk to the Thorne name is simply too great." He allowed Alistair to absorb this, watching the calculations flicker behind his father's cold eyes. Alistair's rage at the initial scandal had been palpable, but Rex knew that, ultimately, profit would always trump pride. "The board? They won't be pleased," Alistair finally said, his voice tight with barely suppressed anger. "The board will understand," Rex countered, his tone confident. "I will present them with a revised strategy, one that focuses on internal growth and expansion, rather than relying on a potentially unstable alliance." He had already spent the past few days, while ostensibly recovering, analyzing the Thorne Industries portfolio, identifying weaknesses, and formulating a new plan. He had, in essence, prepared a presentation that would showcase his, Elias's, newfound business acumen and decisive leadership. Alistair stared at him, a flicker of something akin to respect in his eyes. "You've changed, Elias," The accident, it clarified things, Rex said, offering a carefully calibrated shrug. I see things more clearly now. And he did. He saw the vulnerability of the Vance Empire, the cracks in its foundation that Serafina had so desperately tried to conceal. He saw the opportunities, the ways to exploit those weaknesses, to dismantle her world piece by piece. The official announcement was made the next day. A carefully worded press release citing irreconcilable differences and mutual agreement. The financial markets reacted immediately. Vance stock plummeted. The carefully constructed facade of stability that Serafina's family had maintained for years began to crumble. Rex watched the numbers fall with a detached satisfaction. This was merely the first step. The social ostracism was a more subtle, insidious process. It began with whispers, carefully planted rumors that circulated through their tight-knit social circle. Not about Serafina's infidelity. That was old news. Rex focused on something far more damaging. Her sanity. Poor Elias, he'd sigh to a group of concerned socialites at a charity luncheon, his voice laced with a carefully crafted blend of sadness and concern. I can't go into details, of course, but the accident, it brought things to light. Things I hadn't realized about Serafina, her instability. He'd let the word hang in the air, letting their imaginations fill in the blanks. He'd speak of mood swings, of erratic behavior, of delusions. He'd use his amnesia as the perfect shield, claiming he couldn't remember specifics, but he had a deep, unsettling feeling that something was profoundly wrong. The rumors spread like wildfire. Serafina, once the darling of society, found herself increasingly isolated. Invitations dried up. Friends became distant. Whispers followed her wherever she went. Rex engineered situations to amplify her humiliation. He'd accidentally bump into her at a gallery opening, feigning surprise and concern. "Serafina, you look... well, are you feeling all right?" he'd ask, his voice loud enough for others to overhear. He'd forget to invite her to a crucial business gathering, then express his sincere apologies in a public forum, making it clear that her absence was due to her delicate condition. Each act was small, subtle, but cumulatively devastating. He was dismantling her social standing, brick by bricks, leaving her exposed and vulnerable. Jasper, meanwhile, was proving to be a surprisingly easy target. Rex had no intention of confronting him directly. That would be too crude. Instead, he adopted a strategy of benevolent sabotage. He befriended Jasper, expressing his admiration for his art and his concern for his well-being. He offered him opportunities, a solo exhibition at a prestigious gallery, introductions to influential collectors, opportunities that were, in reality, carefully designed traps. The gallery exhibition, for example, was scheduled for the same week as a major international art fair, ensuring that all the serious collectors and critics would be out of town. The few who did attend were subtly guided by Rex's contacts to focus on the flaws in Jasper's work, his derivative style, his lack of originality. The introductions to influential collectors turned out to be equally disastrous. Rex introduced Jasper to individuals known for their eccentric tastes and their penchant for publicly humiliating artists they deemed unworthy. "He's so raw, so unpolished," one collector, a notorious socialite with a razor-sharp tongue, declared loudly at a dinner party within earshot of Jasper. "He reminds me of a street performer, begging for attention." Rex, of course, expressed his disappointment at these developments, offering Jasper empty platitudes and insincere encouragement. He watched with a cold detachment as Jasper's confidence crumbled, his ambition turning to bitterness and resentment. He also started planting seeds of doubt about Serafina. During their casual conversations, Rex would subtly hint at her manipulative past, her calculated approach to relationships, her inability to truly love. "She's a beautiful woman, Jasper," Rex said one evening, over drinks at a dimly lit bar. "But be careful. Some women, they collect hearts like trophies. They enjoy the power, the control, but they never truly give themselves." He saw the flicker of doubt in Jasper's eyes, the seed of suspicion taking root. The pressure of social ostracism, financial ruin, and now, the growing uncertainty about Serafina's affections was beginning to take its toll. Lysander, meanwhile, was becoming increasingly uneasy. He had initially dismissed Elias's transformation as a convenient excuse, a way to escape a messy engagement. But he couldn't ignore the cold, calculating gleam in his half-brother's eyes, the ruthless efficiency with which he was dismantling Serafina's life. One evening, he cornered Rex in the library, the same room where the fire had changed everything. "What are you doing, Elias?" he demanded, his voice low and urgent. "This isn't you. This is monstrous." Rex turned, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Elias is gone, Lysander. He's resting." "Resting?" Lysander scoffed. "Or dead. You've become something else, something cold." Rex shrugged. "Adaptation, Lysander. Survival. You should learn from it." "She hurt you. I know," Lysander continued, his voice pleading. "But this is beyond revenge. This is destruction." Rex turned his back, dismissing him. "She made her choices. She reaps the consequences." "And what about you?" Lysander challenged. "What are your consequences?" Rex didn't answer. He simply stared out the window, at the sprawling city lights, a cold, empty void where his heart should have been. Lysander, desperate and feeling like he was going to be sick, decided to snoop. He went to Rex's room. He found files and files of documents detailing Serafina, Jasper, his own father, even Vivian. He realized the extent of Rex's cold planning. He felt a chill he couldn't shake. He knew he needed to do something, to say something. But to whom? Who would believe him? And what if Rex found out? He left the room, feeling like he was walking on eggshells, trapped in a nightmare he couldn't escape. He decided to act like everything was normal, until he could figure out a plan. He hated feeling useless. Rex had his eyes next on Vivian. One night when Alistair was away, Rex asked to speak with her in private. "Vivian, we need to talk," he said. She entered the living room, her eyes already filled with mistrust. "What is this about, Elias?" Rex looked up at her, and for the first time since he'd taken over, he smiled. A chilling, genuine smile. "I know, Vivian. I know about everything. The affairs, the hidden accounts, the plans you had to push for Lysander to be made the sole heir." Vivian's perfectly made-up face turned ashen. You don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, I do. I have proof. Your emails, your bank statements, the private investigator you hired to spy on Alistair. Remember him?" Vivian collapsed onto the sofa, defeated. "What do you want?" "I want you out of this house, out of our lives. You have 24 hours to pack your things and leave. I've already arranged for a generous settlement. Consider it hush money." "You can't do this," she cried. "I can, and I will. And if you try to fight me, I'll release everything to Alistair and to the press. Your precious reputation will be ruined. You'll be a pariah, Vivian, just like you tried to make me." Vivian left that night, her face a mask of rage and despair. The final confrontation with Serafina was inevitable. She had lost everything: her family's fortune, her social standing, Her lover. She was a shadow of her former self, her beauty marred by exhaustion and despair. She found him at the Thorne mansion, in the very same library where he had been trapped as a child. She had somehow managed to bypass the security, driven by a desperate need for answers, for closure, for something. "You did this," she said, her voice hoarse, her eyes filled with a mixture of hatred and bewilderment. "You orchestrated all of it. My family, my friends. Jasper." Rex, seated in a leather armchair, a book resting open on his lap, a volume of Machiavelli, appropriately enough, looked up at her calmly. He didn't deny it. "You made me do it, Serafina," he said, his voice devoid of any emotion. "You broke him. You shattered him. I simply cleaned up the mess." "He loved you!" she cried, her voice cracking. "He would have done anything for you!" "Love is a weakness," Rex countered, his voice cold and dismissive. "A vulnerability. Elias was flawed. He needed to be protected." "Protected? You destroyed everything he cared about. You destroyed me!" Rex rose from his chair, slowly approaching her. "You destroyed yourself, Serafina. You chose ambition over affection, manipulation over honesty. You played a game and you lost." He reached out and touched her cheek, his fingers tracing the lines of exhaustion and despair. "I'm not doing this for revenge, Serafina. I'm doing this for him. To ensure that he never suffers like that again. To make sure that no one ever has the power to hurt him like that again." He revealed his knowledge of her past, the calculated seductions, the broken engagements, the trail of shattered hearts she had left in her wake. He laid bare her true nature, the cold, ambitious core that she had so carefully concealed beneath a veneer of charm and sophistication. Serafina stared at him, her eyes wide with horror. She had underestimated him. She had underestimated the depth of his otherness. She had thought she was playing a game with a naive, emotionally stunted fool. She had realized, too late, that she was facing something far more dangerous, something far more ruthless. She broke down, sobbing uncontrollably, the carefully constructed facade of her life collapsing around her. The reckoning was complete. The thanks. Approx 1,500 words. The email arrived, predictably, amidst the wreckage of Jasper Croft's life. A simple, almost pathetically hopeful message. "Elias, I know I have no right to ask this, but I need to talk to you. I need to..." "Explain. Please, I'm at my studio." "Jasper." Rex read the message, a faint, humorless smile playing on his lips. He had anticipated this. The desperation, the clinging to any semblance of understanding, of forgiveness. It was also predictable. Jasper's despair was a palpable thing, a miasma that clung to the air around him like a shroud. His once vibrant artistic career was in ruins. The provocative sculptor, the darling of the avant-garde, had become a pariah, a cautionary tale whispered in hushed tones at gallery openings. Serafina, his muse, his lover, his supposed ticket to a life beyond the constraints of his humble origins, had abandoned him without a backward glance. She had, with the cold efficiency of a surgeon, severed all ties, leaving him to bleed out alone. Rex, of course, had orchestrated this with meticulous care. He had watched with a detached interest as Jasper's world crumbled, as his confidence eroded, as his dreams turned to ashes. The failed exhibition, the scathing reviews, the whispers and the pointed fingers, all carefully orchestrated, subtly manipulated. The studio, when Rex arrived, was a reflection of Jasper's inner turmoil. It was a cavernous, dilapidated space in a forgotten corner of the city, a far cry from the sleek, minimalist galleries where he had once showcased his work. Dust motes danced in the shafts of pale sunlight, that filtered through the grimy windows. Unfinished sculptures, shrouded in dusty sheets, stood like ghostly sentinels. The air was thick with the scent of stale paint and despair. Jasper was sitting on a paint-splattered stool, his head in his hands. He looked up as Rex entered, his eyes red-rimmed, his face haggard. He looked broken. "Elias," he said, his voice hoarse. "Thank you for coming." Rex offered a polite nod, his expression unreadable. "Jasper, you asked to see me." He made no move to sit, instead surveying the desolate studio with a detached curiosity. He let the silence hang heavy, amplifying Jasper's discomfort. I don't know where to begin," Jasper stammered, his gaze flitting nervously around the room. "Everything? It's all fallen apart." "Indeed," Rex agreed, his voice smooth and devoid of any inflection. "It appears you've suffered a series of unfortunate setbacks." Jasper flinched at the words, his eyes welling with unshed tears. It's Serafina. She used me, Elias. She manipulated me, and you knew, didn't you? You knew all along." Rex allowed a faint smile to touch his lips. "Let's just say I had my suspicions." "Suspicions?" Jasper laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "You orchestrated this whole thing, didn't you? The exhibition, the reviews, everything. You destroyed me." "Did I?" Rex asked, tilting his head. "Or did you destroy yourself, Jasper? You allowed yourself to be blinded by ambition, by a woman's fleeting affection. You made your choices. But you knew about Serafina. You knew what she was like, and you let me." "I gave you an opportunity, Jasper," Rex interrupted, his voice turning cold. "An opportunity to prove your worth, to demonstrate your talent. You failed. Miserably." He paused, letting his words sink in. Then he adopted a tone of almost paternal concern. "But I'm not a vindictive man, Jasper. I understand. You were misled. You were a victim of Serafina's charms. Just as I was." He sighed, a carefully crafted expression of regret crossing his face. "I suppose, in a way, we were both victims, weren't we?" Jasper stared at him, his eyes filled with a desperate plea for understanding. "Elias, I don't know what to do. I've lost everything. My career, my reputation, Serafina." Rex walked over to a dusty workbench, picking up a small, unfinished sculpture, a twisted, contorted form that seemed to embody Jasper's despair. "You're a talented artist, Jasper," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "Perhaps too talented for this city, too sensitive." He turned back to Jasper, his expression shifting, becoming almost sympathetic. "I want to help you, Jasper," he said. "I want to offer you a fresh start." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, folded check. He placed it on the workbench next to the unfinished sculpture. "This is a modest sum," he explained. "Enough to cover your debts, to get you out of this city, to start over. Somewhere new, somewhere where no one knows your name." It was a calculated insult, a final, subtle act of humiliation. The money was enough to ensure Jasper's survival, but not enough to restore his former glory, to erase the stain on his reputation. It was a one-way ticket to oblivion. Jasper stared at the check, his face a mixture of disbelief and despair. He understood. He understood the twisted game that had been played, the cruel irony of this generous offer. He had been used, manipulated, and then discarded. "Thank you, Elias," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Thank you for opening my eyes." The words were laced with a bitter sarcasm that Rex, of course, fully appreciated. He offered a final, polite nod. "Good luck, Jasper," he said. "I wish you all the best." He turned and left, leaving Jasper alone in the desolate studio, the symbol of his shattered dreams. The thanks had been delivered. With Seraphina and Jasper dispatched, only one piece remained on the chessboard: Alistair Thorne. The downfall of Alistair was, in many ways, the easiest part of Rex's plan. The man was a creature of habit, of predictable patterns, of ruthless ambition that had blinded him to the shifting landscape around him. He had built his empire on a foundation of shaky deals, questionable ethics, and a network of contacts who valued profit above loyalty. Rex, having spent years observing Alistair, knew his weaknesses. He knew the skeletons in his closet, the secrets he had so carefully guarded. He had access to the files, the accounts, the incriminating evidence that could bring the entire Thorne empire crashing down. He began subtly, leveraging his newfound authority within the company. He questioned decisions, challenged assumptions, demanded transparency. He used Alistair's own methods against him, employing a ruthless efficiency that surprised and unnerved the older man. The board of directors, initially loyal to Alistair, began to waver. Rex presented them with a compelling vision of the future, a future without the looming threat of scandal, a future of sustainable growth and ethical practices. He painted Alistair as a relic of the past, a liability, a threat to their own investments. The final blow came in the form of a meticulously documented report detailing Alistair's past transgressions: tax evasion, insider trading, bribery. Rex presented the report to the board, his voice calm and measured, his expression devoid of any emotion. "This is outrageous!" Alistair roared, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. "These are lies! Fabrications!" But the evidence was irrefutable. The board, swayed by Rex's calm demeanor and the damning evidence before them, voted to remove Alistair from his position as CEO. The confrontation, when it came, was anticlimactic. Alistair, stripped of his power, his authority, his very identity, was a shadow of his former self. He stood in his once imposing office, now bare of his personal effects, his gaze fixed on Rex with a mixture of hatred and disbelief. You did this," he stammered, his voice weak and trembling. "My own son." "Elias is gone," Rex corrected, his voice cold and indifferent. "He was weak. He allowed himself to be manipulated, to be used. I am what remains." "You're a monster," Alistair whispered, his eyes filled with a chilling realization. Rex smiled, a slow, predatory curve of his lips. "Perhaps. But I am a successful monster." He turned and walked away, leaving Alistair alone in the empty office, the ruins of his empire crumbling around him. The reckoning was complete. The Thorne Empire was his.